Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So update 1.54 is here today, and alongside it are 3 brand new events. Now there are essentially 5 if you include the 2 new special events, but I'll be covering them in a separate video. Of course, as always, on the day of an update I'm going to give you an event guide and rundown of all 3 of the new events, and throughout I will give you my thoughts and opinions on each. So let's kick things off then with event number 1, the Jimny Cup. So all of the Jimny Cup events have changed quite a bit due to the fact that we can now run 2 versions of the Jimny. However, this one here takes place at Grand Valley on the south layout. As you can see, it's a 3-lap sprint race with 12 cars in total. Now, of course, the regulations have changed. It was originally just the Jimny XC, but of course now we can also run the Jimny Sierra JC. Now, in terms of the rewards, they really aren't too bad for this one. 47,000 for first, 28 for second, and third is 18k. Now, your main rival cars are of course going to be a mixture of the XC or the K version and the JC. BOP and tuning prohibited is off, must be a garage car, car settings are allowed, mechanical damage is none, shortcut penalty off, and wall collision penalty off. And of course we're at Grand Valley South. So let's go ahead and get this event started then. Now, a word of warning before we do get into it properly: you may want to put a few upgrades on your Jimny. Of course, as always, I'm running on the hardest difficulty and trying to stay as close to the AI as possible so that I'm not just kind of blasting off into the distance. So I'm running at around about 120 brake horsepower here, and that was just enough to take a relatively easy win in the end. Now, in terms of the event itself, a lot of the Jimnys are incredibly unstable and the AI are just not very consistent in them, as made note of by this Jimny right here, which got incredibly unstable under braking. Now, I did notice that the XC variant or the K variant does seem to be the more unstable of the bunch, so you're going to see a lot of them getting very much out of control as soon as they put on the brakes. However, this does mean you can take massive advantage of this, and that's where the majority of your overtakes are going to take place. Whilst the Jimnys are really not that slow in a straight line, if you're not overpowered, the majority of that is going to come through the braking zones where they get incredibly unstable. So be sure to take advantage of that. Again though, you just want to watch for the AI just getting really out of control, as they won't think twice to just pile into you. So as you can see, we did manage to get one under braking, but the other not so much. We are eventually going to manage to outrun him just, and of course get around the outside there before you see just up ahead another Jimny getting, well, quite a bit out of control. Now, when it comes to the spread of the field, there is quite a spread amongst them. Of course, there's only 12 cars on the grid entirely, including yourselves, and again that does lead to a very easy opportunity to grab that clean race bonus, and that's really what you want to be aiming for. Again, with that 50% on top, it does make it a worthwhile event for an event that really only takes a few minutes. But again, once you get towards the front of the grid, there's probably more than likely going to be a couple of them together, and that's where you really want to watch yourself, as more than likely you're going to get these pair on the final lap. As you can see, we did manage to get one under braking once again, and we're going to do the exact same here. As this Jimny just gets a little bit out of shape, we stick it up the inside and then it's job done. After that, we kept it nice and clean as we take a pretty easy win in the end at this brand new Jimny Cup event. So there we go, first place done and dusted. Let's move into the timings and results. So in total, with a fairly balanced car, it took me 4 minutes 52.222 with a fastest lap of a 1:36.257 on the second lap, a gap in the end of just over 1 second. Now, the payout for this one with that clean race bonus is 70,500 credits, so it's really not too bad for an event that you could realistically do inside of 3 minutes running an overpowered Jimny. So it's time to give you my thoughts and opinions on this event. I do appreciate the fact that we can now run the Sierra variant in all of the Jimny Cup events. I do think it adds to the replayability of the entire event roster. I do like putting them side by side and testing them out together, so it's quite nice to see both the Sierra and the K variant battling it out through all of the Jimny Cup events. Now, specifically this event, I do think it is one of the better ones we've had. If we look back to the last one that we got, which was with Eiger Norsvond, it was a very run-of-the-mill event. Very basic, the cars didn't suit the layout, and it was just kind of all over the place. this event here feels much better towards both variants of the Jimny. I do really like the fact that it's set at night rather than the day. It just kind of differentiates it from the rest of the events, and of course with the added replayability of the new Jimny model, I do think this event is much better than it actually could have been. So by no means is it absolutely mind-blowing, but it's certainly not absolutely terrible either. Let's move into event number 2 then. This is the Porsche Cup. Of course, one of the OG events for Gran Turismo 7. The Porsche Cup returns once again. This time, however, we are at Raceway Laguna Seca. Of course, this one was bound to happen at some point, so let's go ahead and check out the smaller details for this one. So, as you can see, this is a 5-lap sprint race. Now, there are a fair few amount of cars on grid. There are 16 in total, including yourself, obviously. A PP limit of 650 or less. And, of course, the manufacturer must be Porsche. Now, in terms of the reward, first is 80k, 48k, and then 32k for third. Your main rivals for this event are the likes of the 911 Carrera RS from 1992, the Carrera RS CS from 95, the Carrera RS from 95, and the 911 Turbo from 1981. However, there are a vast array of different Porsches on the grid. Car restrictions, BOP and tuning prohibited is off. Car use must be a garage car. Car settings are of course allowed here. Now in terms of the race settings next, we do have mechanical damage off, shortcut penalty off, and wall collision penalty off. And of course it takes place at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. So it's time to dive into event number 2. Now of course I'm using the Porsche 911 Turbo S, the 992 generation from 2020. This is one of the new cars of the update. There are absolutely zero changes to this car. It's straight out of Brand Central and it's going to work absolute wonders here. Now, just a word of warning, although the majority of the field are going to be pretty easy to overtake and get through, the first leading car for me at least was another one of these Porsche, and it was absolutely rapid. Now of course we do have the benefit of 4-wheel drive. It's a very modern car, it's very quick, and although you can feel it accelerating like a rocket, where it really impressed me was when the revs started building. This car is insanely fast, so just be aware if you do get this car as an AI opponent in your race, that car more than likely will end up leading by a fair margin in the end. So the target here is to try and get through the grid as fast as possible, as more than likely there's going to be a huge gap once you get to second place to the lead car. At that point you're going to have to start chipping away at the time and try and get that lead as soon as possible. Of course there is 5 laps here available to us, which is plenty enough time. As you can see, by lap 2 we're already moving up into 7th position, as well as picking off a couple more here as we're going to get them under braking. We're going to go down the inside aggressive as possible, and it's basically 2 in 1 there as we manage to get that move done and dusted and move ourselves into P5. Now a little bit later on lap 3, there are a few more cars up ahead of us, so gaps starting to form in the grid. The first car is the 911 GT3, the 997 generation, and then of course up ahead we did have one of the 996 GT3s. Now that car would typically be the lead car in any other event, but of course with the inclusion of the new Turbo S, that thing was way up the road, as you can see, by around about 12 seconds by the time we managed to catch it. So as we crossed the line to go onto the 5th and final lap was when we eventually got on the back end of the Turbo S, and we're going to do a bit of late braking here just to throw it up the inside and get this move done and dusted. Now just be aware this car is extremely powerful and extremely grippy, so it will probably put up a pretty hefty fight. You're going to have to work hard for this one. However though, after 5 laps done and dusted, we did manage to build up a 3.9 second lead and a nice easy first place thankfully. So in terms of the times for this one, it was a 7 minutes 48.226 upon completion, a fastest lap of a 132.219 on the final lap there. We did have a gap of almost 4 seconds to second place, but as you can see from then onwards, the Turbo S is just absolutely reigning supreme, as the 911 GT3 there was 14 seconds back from myself and 10 seconds back from second place. So on to the payout for this one. It's 120,000 credits with that clean race bonus, so that's really not too bad at all. Absolutely worth your time, this one. So here's my thoughts and opinions. Now honestly, I did really enjoy this event. I will be truthfully honest here, I am not the biggest fan of Laguna Seca in terms of the racing. For me, it's a much better time trial track than it is an actual racetrack. I do find that the AI in GT7 really isn't worth going up against here, and the majority of the time they are absolutely inconsistent. However, having that new Turbo S in there and giving me a good run for my money was incredibly enjoyable. So if you haven't tried the new Porsche out since the update, then honestly this is the place to do so. I really did enjoy this one. Let's move into the final event then. Race of the Turbo Sports Car finally returns. This time it goes over at Mount Panorama or Bathurst. Finally another event at this track which goes massively underappreciated by Polyphony, so it's great to see more events here. Always welcome. This is a 5-lap race, of course limited to 700 pp. So let's go ahead and look at the finer details. Of course, 5 laps for this one, 16 cars on grid including yourself. PP rating must be 700 or less and turbocharged. First is 90k, 54k and then 36k. Your main rival cars are the likes of the Fair Lady Z, the GR Yaris 911 Turbo and of course the Lancer Evolution 15. However, I didn't see any of these during this event. Car restrictions, BOP and tuning prohibited is off, must be a garage car and car settings are allowed. Mechanical damage none and both penalties are off. And of course we're at Bathurst finally. So of course my car of choice here would be the new Cosworth. 700 pp at this event is extremely fair as well for this car, as I believe like fully upgraded it runs under 700 pp even on racing tyres, which is absolutely insane. So this may just be one of the meta cars for the 700 pp grind. However, here it absolutely went to work. The first little roadblock we had was this Z performance here, as we did manage to get stuck behind it for a while. It was all over the place, and this is where we're going to run and kind of notice the first, I guess, major issue of the AI here. They're incredibly terrible through the kind of mountain section. Again, a lot of these cars are extremely powerful and most of them are tuned for the straight line speed, meaning that once they get to that mountain section you're going to pick them off like no tomorrow. So just be aware as well when you go for the overtake in the mountain, because these cars majority of the time are out of control, that they will probably whack into you if you want that clean race bonus anyway. So the first major hurdle we found in this event was cars just blocking up together and kind of blocking the road. It's seen the Supra cause this one. Eventually a lot of cars started piling in here and eventually we're going to have to try and pick them off one by one. Now a car to note in this group is going to be the AMG GTR. If you see that car in your event and it's working its way through, once it does manage to get through, it's going to absolutely fly off up the road. So you want to be overtaking that car sooner rather than later. Thankfully we did manage to get our move done just here. As mentioned, that GTR, the AMG, is incredibly unstable through this tighter section. However, the Civics not so much. They're very quick through here. However, thankfully we do have the 4-wheel drive system on the Escort Cosworth here, so thankfully we could get the drive out of the corners. Of course the Civics both front wheel drive, so we went side by side with the RCR garage, managing to get it down the inside, of course put to the outside, but getting the drive away on the corners thankfully, and that would allow us to then pick off the next Civic with our higher top speed and better acceleration. So a little bit further up the road we would run into another Escort RS Cosworth. As you can see, this one kind of just having a lonely race on his own, so we got around that one quite easily and picked him off before having to absolutely chase down the leader, which as you can see was this Maserati MC20. This thing was an absolute rocket ship in a straight line, and I believe the Mercedes AMG GTR would have been the same had it escaped that big pile of cars earlier on. As you can see, every single time we hit one of the straights, this thing will just accelerate way over a second in front, so it got extremely frustrating. However, thankfully we do have that bit extra stability through the corners, a little bit more agile as well, and of course we don't have the sheer amount of horsepower that Maserati does, so we did manage to get the move here. So it got a little bit unsteady out of the corner, up the hill, down the inside, and of course covering that one off, and then the Maserati would lose a ton of time in the mountain section, giving us a fairly nice easy win in the end. end. So let's go ahead and have a look at the timings. In the end, we did it in 11 minutes 29 seconds, 0.887, with a 13.6 second gap to second place in the end, making up most of our time in the mountain section. In terms of our fastest lap, a 2 minute 13.494 on lap 5. The payout isn't too bad here. It's probably not as good as terms of the Porsche one for the time taken to the actual completion, 135k with that clean race bonus. Now, in terms of my thoughts and opinions for this one, I really enjoyed this event. I know to most people it's just a typical sprint race, but honestly I absolutely love the race of the Turbo Sports Cars events. I think they're fantastic for showing off many different AIs, many different cars, and it does pretty much change up every single time you run it. Now, in terms of the track choice itself, that is fantastic. Look, Mount Panorama or Bathurst is massively underrepresented in GT7. I just don't think Polyphony give it enough love, and I'm really hoping that one day, even if it's in GT8, that we can once again blast the likes of the Fords and Holdens around here at Bathurst and Mount Panorama in some of those longer events. But for now, this will absolutely do. It's incredibly enjoyable, it's a nice little challenge, and you can run a bunch of cars here, and of course AI pretty much changes up every time. So really, this is probably the best of the bunch for all three of the new events. And there we go, that is my update 1.54 event guide. Now, of course, my complaint is that there's just not enough of them. We do also have 2 new special events, which I will cover tomorrow morning, so be sure to join me for that one. Now, in terms of the events themselves, whilst they are, you know, fairly fun overall and definitely different from each other, I certainly feel like Polyphony should start going that extra length to just pile events in. Of course, we had 5 new cars, and really this only targets at least 3 of them. Anyway, that's going to be it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.